Hey guys, this is God of Politics. Welcome back to a brand new video, but before we get started with this video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, join the Discord that is linked down in the description, and check out the website, which is also linked down in the description. That is where I have my election predictions, a compilation of my videos, and my polling averages. And speaking of the polls, I do want to talk about the polls today, and specifically the Trafalgar group. Now, the Trafalgar group, causes a lot of controversy. You've got people on the left who say, just add 5 points to the Democrats' column because it's Trafalgar. And Trafalgar saying Trump's winning by 1 means Biden's winning by 5. That assertion is not right. But then you have people on the right who say, Trafalgar's the only poll I trust. It's the only poll that's going to be right, and it's the only poll that has been right. And that assertion is also wrong. So I'm trying to look at it in an unbiased way to see, which assertion is actually right. Is Trafalgar a good pollster? Where are they good at polling? And should we trust them for this election? Well, I do want to look at some of their past polls. So looking at the 2016 battleground map right here, they did 5 polls. They did Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, and Ohio. First, I'll start with their Ohio poll because this was the only poll, I believe, that they released that they did in October. And this poll had Trump up by 5 percentage points. Trump ended up winning by 8.1. But it's also worth noting that the time they did this poll, the 24th of October to the 26th of October, this was kind of Hillary Clinton's peak in the October time period. You look at this time period, what was going on. Hillary Clinton had just come off the strong debate performances and she had a boost in the polls. So Trafalgar did have Trump only up by 5, which is more, than what most other pollsters had it at. But they actually did underestimate Trump and his support. Then we look at the next poll. We look at the state of Florida. Now, Florida is a state where, the polls were actually quite accurate in 2016. They had Trump winning by 0.2%. He won by 1.2%. And we look at these polls and we see that Trafalgar had Trump winning by 4 and he ended up winning by 1.2. And sure, they were one of the few pollsters that got Trump actually winning, but the thing is that they did overestimate Trump by 2.8 percentage points. So, for example, Opinion Savvy, who had Clinton up by 2, got the poll pretty much just as right as Trafalgar, even though Trafalgar had Trump winning by 4, because Clinton was winning by 2 in their poll, and that's only 3 points off. Trafalgar's poll was 2.8 percentage points off. Quinnipiac's even a better example. Their poll was more accurate than Trafalgar, even though they showed Clinton winning. So that's the kind of thing that you have to watch out for. Another example is North Carolina, where Trafalgar did have Trump winning by 5 percentage points. He ended up winning by 3.7. Now, this is a relatively accurate poll. North Carolina did underestimate Trump in the polling averages. We had polls like Quinnipiac and Gravis that showed Clinton winning. She didn't end up winning in this state. But Trafalgar did show that Trump was winning the state. And they showed that Trump was winning by a pretty significant margin. And he ended up winning by 3.7 percentage points. But again, that's the example of Trafalgar getting it pretty much spot on, but just overestimating Republicans just a little bit. Then we look at probably their most accurate poll is the state of Pennsylvania, where the average had Clinton up 1.9. Not a single other poll at this time had Trump up. Not a single other poll going all the way back to June had Trump up, except for Trafalgar Group, which had Trump up by 1. He ended up winning by 0.7 percentage points, virtually spot on, exactly right. So that, they do get a lot of credit because they did get the state of Pennsylvania right in the 2016 election. And then their final poll that they did in 2016 that I do want to look at is the state of Michigan. Now, Michigan did have Clinton up 3.4 in the average. And again, this was the only poll that was done in Michigan at all on RCP that showed Trump up. They showed Trump up by 2. He won by 0.3 percentage points. So they overestimated him by 1.7 percentage points, which isn't too significant. But the point is that they were the only one to predict a Trump win in Michigan. So next, I do want to go to the 2018 races. So that was 2016. They did 5 polls, which isn't too many because in 2018, they did a number of polls. So I do want to look at a couple of their polls here. First is the state of Florida. In the state of Florida, they did have Ron DeSantis winning by 3, and he won by 0.4 percentage points. So we see a similar story to what they did in 2016. They overestimated Trump in 2016 by 2.8 percentage points. In this race, they overestimated him by 2.6 percentage points. And if I recall correctly, they just released a poll showing Trump up by 3 percentage points, but we will talk about that in just a bit. So again, they did just slightly slightly overestimate Ron DeSantis. This is a poll in the Sun Belt which has great significance, which we'll talk about in a second. Georgia is another state where they actually got it very, very off. They had Trafalgar. Trafalgar had Kemp up 12. He ended up winning by 1.4. So that poll is 10.6% off. So that was, their biggest polling year. They are, founded in Georgia and they operate in Georgia, but that poll was very, very off. That's very inexcusable, but that is what their poll showed. And then their final governor poll was the South Carolina poll. There's only 3 polls from South Carolina, all from Trafalgar Group, and their last poll actually did overestimate the Republican candidate Henry McMaster, who is the current governor, by 7 percentage points. So that's another thing that you have to note, another one of those Sun Belt states. But now looking at the Senate elections. Now, first, I do want to look at Florida. We talked about how they overestimated Ron DeSantis by 2.6 percentage points. In the Senate race, they overestimated Rick Scott by 1.8 percentage points. So that's a more accurate pollster, and the average was closer in the Florida Senate race. Not too accurate, but, when you include polls like Quinnipiac having Nelson up 7, you're going to get a skewed aggregate. But Trafalgar did get it right. Harris X also got it right. So they also do get credit in the state of Florida. Another state where they did a poll in is Arizona. Now, in Arizona, their poll was quite off. They did have McSally winning by 2, and Sinema ended winning by 2.3, so that's a 4.3% polling error. And you're starting to see a consistent trend that in these Sun Belt areas, they're overestimating Republicans. You'll see a very clear example of that here in the state of Nevada, where they did have Dean Heller winning by 3 percentage points. Jackie Rosen ended up winning by 5. That's another very big polling error. Nevada polling is notoriously underestimates Democrats, and that is another example of it here. We look at another example is the North Dakota Senate race, where they actually underestimated the Democrat, or actually underestimated the Republican by 2 percentage points, but that's a fairly spot-on poll. We also look at the Missouri Senate race, where they actually underestimated Josh Hawley by 2 percentage points as well, so that is also a fairly accurate poll. They did a West Virginia poll, but it was before all the Kavanaugh stuff, and it was way back in July, so I'm not going to include that, but they did have Joe Manchin up by a significant amount. We look at Michigan. They did have Stevie Stabenow up by 9 percentage points. She ended up winning by 6.4, so they actually overestimated the Democrat by 2.6 percentage points. So that is something very crucial that you should note. And I think that is all the polls that we have. We also have the Montana Senate race. This is the final Senate race here, where they actually had Tester winning by 1. He ended up winning by 3.1, so they overestimated the Republican Party with Matt Rosendale by 2.1 percentage points. And then finally, I do want to look at their 2019 governor poll from the state of Louisiana. They had John Bel Edwards winning by 23 points, with Eddie Raspone coming in second place at 25 percentage points. So they actually did underestimate the Democrat John Bel Edwards, who is the current governor, by 3.8 percentage points. I just thought I should note that as well. But that is all of their polls, or all of their last polls within the last month of the race. And I actually I did a little bit of calculations. For the Rust Belt, their average polling error is 1.9 percentage points. So, any given poll that they have in the Rust Belt, which includes, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, those kinds of states, they had an average error of 1.9 percentage points. If you look at the average error on a partisan basis, so who, in a Democrat versus Republican sale, who do they actually favor? And they actually favor Democrats by 0.9 percentage points. Now, sure, there was only 4 polls done in the Rust Belt that do bring up that 0.9 percentage points Democrat favor. And one is Ohio in 2016. The second is the Michigan Senate race in 2018. But, the gist of that is what I would say is their Rust Belt polling is generally very, very accurate. And you should trust their Rust Belt polling because, if they release on Election Day a poll with Trump up by 2 percentage points in Pennsylvania, I will probably put Pennsylvania in the red column. If they release a poll with Trump a 1 in Michigan, that's going to be very, very close. But I may put Trump in Trump's column as well. But I did also average it up for everywhere else. So not necessarily the Sun Belt, but everywhere else except for those Rust Belt polling states. And for the everywhere else, they have an average polling error of 4.05%. So 4% polling error for states that are not Rust Belt states. So the gist of this is what I would say is that their Rust Belt polling is quite accurate. Their Sun Belt and, other places polling is not accurate. and we look at the partisan error on a partisan basis, I pointed out to you that it has a 0.9% partisan error in the Rust Belt. In the everywhere else column, it is 3.3% Republican. So there's a lot more cases in these areas of their polls overestimating the Republican Party. We saw that in Florida. We saw that in Arizona. We saw that in Georgia. We saw that in Nevada. So that's, a very interesting thing. But if we do want to look at the 2020 polls that they do have, we do look at their polls that they currently do have, and they do have a lot of polls. They've been releasing a lot of polls, especially since, they got a lot of media attention after, they were the only one that got it right in 2016. But we do look at, for example, Florida. Florida, they released a poll, Trafalgar, showing Trump up by 2. If you apply their same polling error as 2016, this state of Florida would go to Joe Biden. But for the case of, for the sense of this, I will put it in the lean Republican column, seeing, what does Trafalgar show, if their polls were accurate. We go to another state, and that is the state of Pennsylvania. I filled all of the states in that they don't have polls in it. They did have a poll in Louisiana, but it was safe red. We don't really need to note that. But they did do polls in Arizona, Michigan, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to note each one of these. Pennsylvania is another one of these states where they actually, you go back to 2016, they had Trump up by 1. Now they have Biden up by 2. So that's a lean Democrat state, just like how I have it currently. I did say trust those Trafalgar polls, so that is something to note. Now, before I look at this Michigan poll here, I do want you to note that they were hired to do a poll by a Republican internal group, and while that has not been put on Real Clear Politics, that is still a poll that was done by them, just as they would do any other poll. Their current poll on RCP back from the end of September had Trump up by 1, but they did do a poll with Biden up by 2, and that's more consistent with the other numbers that we're getting from them in the Rust Belt. So I am putting that at lean Democrat because, again, you can look up this poll. They did a poll in Michigan which showed Biden up. We look at another state, and that is the state of Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin's a state, the polls were notoriously off in 2016. Trafalgar actually didn't even do a poll in 2016 there, but they do have a poll now that shows that Biden's actually up by 3 percentage points in the state of Wisconsin. And, they use a similar methodology, pretty much the same for these Rust Belt states, and it seems to be working. So, those are 3 states that you would expect to be in Joe Biden's column. It's based on, all the polls, even Trafalgar at this point. And another state is Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, they haven't done, polls very recently in the state of Minnesota, but if we do go to their polling average and we do go to their polls, they didn't do the poll very recently. They did it back in, August, and they actually had it as a tie, but they did do a poll before that showing Biden up by 5. So I will leave this as toss-up because the most recent poll said it was a tie, but if they did do a poll again, it would probably show something around lean Democrat, but we will see if they do a poll there. And then the next state is the state of Arizona. Now, if we go to the state of Arizona, where they most recently did a poll, and actually, I'll go to the state of Ohio first because, it's in that Rust Belt region. And, as you noted, in 2016, this poll actually underestimated Donald Trump, even for Trafalgar, and their current poll has Trump up by 4, which is lean Republican. You want to apply that to the 2016 errors, it would have Trump winning by 7, but that is another state where they have it as lean Republican. And then the final state where they've done a poll this cycle is the state of Arizona. Now, Arizona is a state that, I've talked about this a lot. It's trending towards the Democrats, and it will be a Democratic state in the future. But how will it go this election? It's a very important state for both candidates, and they do have a poll showing that Donald Trump is up by 4 points in the state of Arizona. This would be more than what his 2016 margin was, and that is, I think even people who think Trump is going to do very well in this election would not say that he's going to win it by more than what he did in 2016. But that is what Trafalgar does show. And note, in 2018, they overestimated Martha McSally by 4.3 percentage points. And they actually also have Mark Kelly up by 2 percentage points in the state of Arizona as well. So, looking at this polling map, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are 269, Donald Trump and Mike Pence are 259. So it would be a very interesting map because, say Donald Trump will be able to win Minnesota, then there would be a tie scenario. I think it would be more like in the scenario that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would win Minnesota, but that is what the map does show regardless. But anyway, the gist about Trafalgar, this is what this video about. I would say trust Trafalgar in the Rust Belt. Take it with a grain of salt as you would for any other poll, checking into the average, see what the average shows, but looking at their individual polls, see, it may overestimate Republicans by maybe a point or 2 in the Rust Belt, but in the Sun Belt, I wouldn't look at their polls too much. I wouldn't trust their polls too much. I don't think they're too accurate, but Again, in the Rust Belt, they have accurate polls. The Sun Belt, they don't. That's kind of the gist of what I'm saying. I said, partisan error in everywhere else is 3.3 percentage points. Polling error in the Rust Belt is 0.9 percentage points to the Democrats. But again, that's with only 4 polls. But anyway, thank you all for watching this video. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, join the Discord that is linked down in the description. And check out the website that is also linked down in the description. I do have Trafalgar polls there that I included in my average sheet, what the average is on my website, which is linked down in the description. So, again, guys, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys later.